Hey everybody, welcome back to Ed Puzzle. For those of you who can't be at home, I've got my Toy Story Christmas sweater on, so that's fun. Check back every day. I'm gonna have some fun Christmas sweaters leading up to vacation on Friday. So we're gonna talk about, before we break for Christmas, immigration in the Gilded Age, which will only give us one more topic really to cover before we move on to our next chapter, which is the Progressive Period. So we've certainly talked about already the rise of corruption in American politics, really the notoriety of it, and the rise of big business. The third major topic is immigration that we talk about. And what we see during this time period is really an influx of immigrants to what becomes known as the land of opportunity, right? And then we see that numbers you can see on the screen. Nearly 19 million immigrants will come to America from Europe, Asia, and elsewhere, seeking really the opportunities that American politics and that American business has created for immigrants. And there's really two views of immigration. One is the more traditional view, and one is the more kind of like 2020, if you will, view. The first one is the melting pot view, the idea that immigrants come to the United States and they assimilate into American culture. They really lose their own individual identities and become part of the greater American culture. The more current view, more contemporary view, is that scholars say immigration is more like a salad bowl. So if you think of a salad bowl, you have all these distinct parts that are still individual when you eat a salad, representing the culture and races and religions that came to America during the time period, right? So while they're all mixed together to make a salad, they also retain their own individual identities. And if you look at this political cartoon here, you can certainly see the idea of being welcome to the land of opportunity. In the background, in the darkness behind, in the top right corner, are the monarchs and leaders of Europe that are really hunting down and ostracizing these individuals, that are forcing them to come here. And if you see on the sign, you can take a look at all of the different things that America is promising: no oppressive taxes, right? No kings, no compulsory military service, no dungeons or anything like that some of the other powers of Europe might have relinquished these people to. And there's Uncle Sam waiting as the U.S. Ark of Refuge, right? Noah's Ark that the United States is, to welcome in these individuals. Really dramatic representation, but pretty much get the gist of that idea of the land of opportunity, land of milk and honey. And this is a period of new immigration. Previously, right, we had talked about, English immigrants, Irish immigrants, even some Italians early on, but those were really your old immigrants in the United States. Now, really in the 1880s, we're getting them from Southern and Eastern Europe that are coming as a result of disease, as a result of political oppression and religious oppression. And we're also getting the first appearance of Asian immigrants during this time period. And they're going to bring with them an incredibly diverse array of religions, cultures, and languages. And most of them, at least those on the East Coast, are coming to Ellis Island, which was really the golden door for European immigrants. Initially, they were welcomed in pretty much without any hesitation whatsoever. As we will see, however, quotas and limitations start being put on immigrants, including surveys asking them about their occupations, their reasons for coming to the United States, their political affiliations, particularly as we get closer to the 20th century. Asian immigrants would arrive at Angel Island in California, and really were put to work, as you can see here, on building the Transcontinental Railroad. They become a major workforce in California and in the West, prompting, as we will see, the rise of nativists over commercial and economic concerns. As happened already with our old immigrants, right? We're going to get the rise of nativist sentiment again with the new immigrants. So despite the fact that the Statue of Liberty, which has been built by the French in commemoration of our centennial, it says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free," America was not necessarily representative of that. Particularly labor unions were very concerned with cheap labor that would replace them, particularly Asian immigrants. That is particularly referenced to. Your Native Americans, those that we saw with Bill the Butcher in Gangs of New York, feared that America would become a mongrel nation. And in just a minute, you're going to read some examples of those sentiments. America is always concerned at this time about the influx of Catholics and the influence of the papacy on the future of America. So you see Protestants represented by Brother Jonathan that are fearful of what will happen with Catholic public schools, Catholics in office. It will lead to the rise of the American Protective Association. And there's also a concern as we get closer to the 20th century over the arrival of political ideas like communism, socialism, and anarchy that are associated particularly with Eastern European immigrants. Asian immigrants get this terrible, terrible name that you'll see a political cartoon of in a second, the Yellow Peril, that their arrival, obviously very stereotypical, very derogatory term, their arrival would signal the end of American civilization somehow. Now, this is not the case of all. Joseph Kepler, who was one of your vocab words, really criticized Americans for their treatment of immigrants. He saw it as hypocritical, right? You can certainly see here in the background, behind these gentlemen who are dressed really as your pompous Gilded Age politicians, that behind them were their ancestors that were immigrants that came to the United States, much like these immigrants are coming now. And President Cleveland in 1897 specifically said that at one time people had a very similar view of the old immigrants, of the ancestors that you saw in that political cartoon. So while nativist sentiment was raging throughout the United States, it was definitely not an embodiment of everyone at the time. But this nativist sentiment is eventually going to work its way into politics. And what we're going to see is the slow restrictions put in place on immigrants, both on the East and West Coast. So we're going to see the introduction of psychological and physical tests, medical examinations placed on immigrants, making sure they're not bringing with them diseases, making sure they're not bringing with them any political affiliations that might erode American democracy or that are coming there to take American jobs. We're going to get the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, another one of your vocab words, that banned the immigration of Chinese immigrants until 1943, and also prevented them from becoming American citizens. We're going to see laws passed that will eliminate any person that might not be of American values or morals that you can see listed here, the insane, any criminals from coming to the United States. And really the climactic end of immigration quotas was the Literacy Test Act, passed over the vetoes of 3 different presidents, including President Wilson, and eventually overridden by Congress. That required that any immigrants to the United States that sought citizenship had to be able to had to be able to read and write in English. And this really comes out of the anti-European sentiment of World War I that we'll talk about. I told you that anytime we do history that relates to Rhode Island, I try and focus on it immediately. And Rhode Island is a home of immigration. It was not for a very long time, if you remember that it was a very nativist, anti-Catholic state. But Rhode Island became, in really the first half of the 20th century, a state divided by nationalities. Where you lived was determined by where you came from. The French Canadians would settle in Woonsocket, the Italians would settle in Providence on Federal Hill, right? The Irish settled more along the Hope Street side of Providence, and really has made Rhode Island a very, today, immigrant state and very divided, which is in a good way ethnically. Rhode Island even has parishes that are divided by culture. For example, St. Joseph's in West Warwick is a very Portuguese parish. So Rhode Island really has benefited from the massive increase in immigration during the Gilded Age.